All right, so that was the general American foreign policy talk, but I know you want some details. What are the factions, the forces, the history? What should we be doing? And I'm here to tell you that I'm not the one you should talk to. Victoria Coates is the one you should talk to, VP of Foreign Policy at the wonderful Heritage Foundation. She is fantastic. Victoria, this shouldn't be hard for you, being as how we've met before. I want you to imagine I have the mind of a small child, and I don't know anything about Syria and the factions and the forces, and should I be cheering? Should I be crying? Where are we going? So I'm just going to hand the show over to you. Tell me what is going on and what we should be doing about it.
Well, Jesse, good to be with you. And I think in this case, we're going to embrace the and. We should be both cheering and crying. On the one hand, we have the horrible Bashar Al Assad. We've had 50 years of brutal Assad rule in Syria. All your listeners and viewers need to know is that at the end, what Assad did in his horrible prison was turn off all the electricity and the ventilation. So literally there are people, political prisoners asphyxiating as we speak because they can't get in to release them. That's what kind of people we're dealing with here. But unfortunately, on the other hand, the so-called rebels are not what you would call freedom fighters. This is not George Washington and the founding fathers by any stretch of the imagination. These folks are alums of both Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The leader of them, Golani, has a $10 million rewards for justice price tag on his head, has committed horrendous atrocities, having been radicalized by both the Second Intifada and 9/11 attacks. And so really at this point, we have on the one hand folks like the Assads who are backed by Iran and Russia. We have the so-called rebels who are backed by Turkey. None of this is good in any way. And I think the Israelis have it 100% right. They are taking additional high ground around their northern border to be able to keep an eye on these people, because just today, the militants posted a video in which they said they were coming first for Jerusalem and then they were coming for the holy shrines in Saudi Arabia. That's who they're after.
Okay, that is such a great place for us to begin. Let's start with the rebels. We'll come back to Assad because actually I'm fascinated about that. You mentioned one couple things stuck out to me. That's Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Now, I know, as many people watching knows, those two groups are not exactly best buds. I find that interesting. So they're united in Syria? That's one. Two, you mentioned their leader has a $10 million bounty on his head. People with that kind of bounty on their head do not live very long. How long has this guy been out here with that kind of bounty?
Well, it's interesting. These factions don't generally get along, and we have the new group HTS, which are the descendants of the old group Jabhat al-Nusra, both specially designated terrorist groups. These tend to be Sunni militant groups, and they generally hate each other. But the one thing they hate more, Jesse, is the United States and Israel, and increasingly Saudi Arabia. And so, that's what unites them, and they sort of have come together here. And so, that's why this is such an enormous degree of concern, is these folks can become wildly violent. And, again, unconfirmed, but videos of them harassing Christians today, it may be just a very short period of time before, they start committing atrocities of their own against the minorities in Syria, which means that President Biden, who was patting himself on the back, almost got a crick in his neck yesterday. He was doing it so enthusiastically about how he had brought peace to Syria. That may look pretty disingenuous in about 2 days' time.
Okay, let's focus on Assad now for a little bit. You mentioned minority groups in Syria. I know there's a Christian minority group there. I know there are others. How were they treated under Assad? And you mentioned he had a 50-year brutal regime. Talk about that and what was up with the minorities there.
No, they were quite brutal as well. And that's where we have to not be looking for any green shoots here, because nobody is on the good side. And so Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al Assad's father, came into power right around 1972. So this has been going on for about 54 years, and or 71, 72, so 53, 54 years. Math isn't my strong suit, but you see what I mean. They've had repeated chemical weapons strikes on minorities in their country. Your listeners might remember there were 2 strikes during the Trump administration in April of 17 and April of 18, which were so horrific, so many children killed, that President Trump ordered military retaliation for this. In 17, unilaterally. In 18, we had British and French support. But this is really, absolutely abhorrent behavior. They also pursued nuclear weapons, which the Israelis took out about 20 years ago. So this is just a very, very bad dictatorship, which has been the hostile enemy of Israel. They've attacked Israel many times, fought wars against Israel. They are responsible for attacks on American citizens. So absolutely nothing really redeemable about the Assads.
Okay, so if they hate Israel and they've attacked Israel, and anyone even vaguely familiar with that region knows they have done so, why such an opposition to them? Clearly, the opposition was significant and widespread. If they were able to topple it, what's Al Qaeda and ISIS's problem with them?
No, Al Qaeda and ISIS don't like them because they are so-called Alawites, which is a sect of Islam that the Sunni extremists like Al Qaeda and ISIS consider heretical. So they want to get rid of them on that grounds, that they're not pure enough in their Islam. And as I said, the Assad stayed in power by brutally repressing everybody who disagreed with them. So they've been on the wrong side of that for 5 decades now. So a lot of people hate them. And maybe 12 years ago, at the beginning of the Syrian civil war, some of the rebels were not entirely infected with this. But if you remember, President Obama allowed the situation to fester, kept drawing red lines and then not doing anything when people crossed over them. And then in 2015, we had the spectacle of him saying, oh, ISIS is just Al-Qaeda JV. And then suddenly ISIS was raging across Syria and Iraq, establishing the largest caliphate since the Middle Ages and beheading American journalists on video, among other atrocities. And, we had to go back into Iraq at that point to get rid of these people. And that's who now we have emerging in Syria. So this has to be watched extremely closely, and primarily so it doesn't spill over into Israel.
Okay, tell me about these Kurdish forces, Victoria. I know they have a bunch of ISIS prisoners from that horrible fighting before. Are these Kurdish forces? I know Turkey is not thrilled about them. What's their status? Who are they? Friends? Enemies? Are they in deep trouble right now?
Again, we're going to embrace the and there. There are a number of different kinds of Kurds scattered across this region. We have the Iraqi Kurds in Kurdistan who have been great and good allies to the United States. You could say a lot better allies than we find in Baghdad, for example. Really good partners. In northeastern Syria, you have a range of folks. We have the Syria Defense Forces, the SDF, which have been since the Obama era are partners in that region. Yes, they have fought bravely against ISIS, have done some sort of questionable things of their own, but of course everyone in the region, in this region largely has. And as you said, they're guarding about 30,000 ISIS militants no one will take. These are the worst of the worst. There are women and children in this group, and literally none of their home countries will take them back. They're so thoroughly radicalized. And the SDF, with the support of about 900 American troops, are the ones who are guarding them and keeping this situation more or less under control. What complicates this further is President Erdogan of Turkey, of course, on the northern border of this region, considers pretty much every Turk a terrorist. There is this PKK group, which are particularly militant against Turkey, that he hates most specifically, but pretty much all Kurds are anathema to Erdogan. And so in a way, you could say the Obama era policy had failure baked in from the outset, because like it or not, Turkey is a fellow member of NATO. Turkey has the largest military in Europe. Do I agree with their current leadership? No. And do I agree with what they're doing now? No. But, this was always going to come to a head. Turkey was always going to win this battle. And we've chosen to create this untenable situation, as I said, primarily as the policy of President Obama. So again, it's extremely complicated and murky, and there really aren't that many white knights here.
Man, there certainly aren't. Okay, finally, I swear this is my last one. What's their problem with Saudi Arabia? You said they're all Sunni. I don't understand.
Well, there is this sect of radical Islam who consider the House of Saud the illegitimate keeper of the two mosques, the two holiest sites of Islam in Mecca and Medina, and that they want to dominate those. And so they have also been hostile to our traditional Gulf partners and allies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, for example, Bahrain. Even though they are Sunni, they are considered way too moderate for these jihadist extremists. And so they want to take over these holy sites. And remember, the third holiest site in Islam is Jerusalem. And so first they want to come for the mosques, and then they want to come for Jerusalem, because the added benefit of Jerusalem is they would get to kill a whole lot of Jews, which is their other favorite pursuit. So this is an interesting scenario, though, because it makes the case for why a peace deal, an accord, or a normalization deal, if you will, between Saudi Arabia and Israel makes so much sense. They're facing a common enemy here, which is also the enemy of the United States. It's the same kind of scenario where they're the little Satan and we're the big Satan.
Yeah, no doubt. Victoria, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Appreciate it. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.